Get fast, reliable internet and smooth, low-lag connection from Xfinity. Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hadfield, and this week I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox Podcast Unlocked.
Hello, hello.
Hello as well to you, and Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Season's greetings.
And as the year begins to wind down, we thought this would be a good time to take stock of what were the most next-gen games released this year. And by that, of course, we mean what were the most current-gen games released this year. But as ever, the name of this show is not Current Gen Console Watch, so it is the most next-gen games released this year. What are the games that are really taking full advantage of our current hardware and could not have been accomplished on a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One? And I think a good place to start would be with the recent release, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Not only did it turn out just to be a super fun video game, it's also doing some really impressive stuff, only on Series X and S right now on console. Uses ray tracing, which makes for some great lighting while you're exploring caves and tombs. It is locked at 60 frames per second on Series X, and it's doing really cool stuff with dialogue, where if Indy is exploring a big space with someone else, it will very realistically depict, how that environment would affect people's dialogue, depending on, how far away they are from you and what sort of like echoes would be created by that specific space. So doing very, very cool stuff there. Ryan, I'm so happy this game turned out so well.
It's my game of the year, personally.
There you go.
It's that good, and certainly the presentation is part of that. Like, I don't want to spoil the opening of the game, but
right.
the visual prowess of the game is instantly, and I do mean instantly, obvious from where the game begins. It is a gorgeous game to look at. The animation team, art team did such a great job on the Harrison Ford likeness.
Mm-hmm.
And as you pointed out, Damon, there's just so many great little lighting touches, from HDR bits as you kind of come in and out of caves into light, or back and forth light and darkness, and the ray tracing stuff. I am just having an absolute ball with this game. I had really good feelings about it from the first behind closed doors preview I got, where it really felt like the sort of core development team's first ever game together, which was the Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, which coincidentally turned 20 this year. And of course, that same team has gone on to make some great Wolfenstein games, and actually playing it, yeah, it's definitely got some Riddick in there. There's a little bit of Thief, another favorite of mine. There's a little Dishonored in there, maybe. There's so many great touches and nods to, like, there's a very early on nod to the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. So there's just so much going on with this game, and the visuals just match up to how great the gameplay is. And so I think it's definitely one of the most next-gen games of 2024 for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's doing all this cool stuff with tech, but then gameplay-wise, it feels a little bit more classic, like an Xbox 360 era game, which I mean in a very good way, complimentary way.
Yeah.
Max, have you gotten to spend any time with Indiana Jones yet?
Oh yeah, no, I'm madly in love with it. The old LucasArts point and click Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis is one of my all-time favorite games, and this scratches a very similar itch. I think, like a lot of people, I was sort of hearing machine games and thinking it was going to be more shooter heavy, but it has so much adventure game DNA, which really fits quite well. There's still plenty of like punching bad guys and all that, and doing getting in trouble, but like the archaeology of it all is really fun, and I'm taking my time with it and having a very good time. But I feel like there's a very good chance this winds up being my game of the year as well.
Well, on the PlayStation side, there's some stuff to it that was impressive as well, and I think one of the best looking games of the year on any platform would be Astro Bot. This is a game that runs at a constant 60 frames per second with just constant visual flares, neon explosions, fireworks, multiple physics simulations happening, countless objects on screen that you can interact with. I think it's probably the most polished game of the year that I've played. There's sometimes multiple fluid simulations interacting with each other, for example, water and mud. Really large levels that are cool, doing cool things with depth of field, where if you climbed all the way to the top of a mountain or building or whatever, you can look back where you came from, and it's sort of slightly blurred, which creates this cool depth of field, but you can still, it's all still there and rendered. You can still go back to any of those points at any time. Then there's all the benefits of the DualSense controller and all the cool stuff it's doing with, the tactile stuff you can feel in your hands. And finally, these gigantic, huge bosses that are animated perfectly with never a drop in frame rate. I think Astro Bot is It's just a really, really impressive package. It's like if Mario Odyssey is here, it's like right there. It's right on the heels of like Nintendo quality platforming.
No, definitely. And it's also such a great showcase of, again, the PS5, the original sort of Astro Bot, Astro's Playroom, which came packed in with the PS5, was such a delight. That was such a kind of unexpected joy to come along, like a cool free video game. And this is very much more of the same, but with the advantage of having had more time to, work with this hardware. And yeah, I mean, it's the kind of game because it's not realistic per se. Like it's not photorealistic. Right. It's obviously very cartoony and very colorful. And it's easy to kind of almost, ignore how much realism is in there in terms of just how fluids behave, how many objects are on screen, the physics of it all, the reflections on surfaces, just little things like that, and of course how it all integrates with the 3D sound. I remember like one of the first things in Astro's Playroom is just when you walk on a glass plate and you get a little bit of that sound effect out of the controller, and and a little bit of haptics, and it's all of that, but just so much more of it. And it's such a wonderful celebration of, the PlayStation brand ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, which turned 30 this year. And it was just so nice to see all these little nostalgic touches. But again, end of the day, it's just a really cool tech demo too, which is great.
Ryan, you're a big fan of Mario Odyssey, or I know you're eagerly awaiting the announcement of the next 3D Mario game. Were you impressed with Astro Bot this year?
I have not had a chance to dig into it yet.
Goodness.
We kind of were starved for games for a lot of the year, and then it's all been backloaded here in the last 3-4 months. So Astro Bot's still on my in my backlog to playlist, but I can genuinely and honestly say that I have not heard a single bad word about it, and certainly every bit of footage I've seen it's no surprise too with what this team has pulled off before, as Max was saying, from a technical perspective. So yeah, it's on the one hand, it's always awesome to hear that these guys and Sony first party in general will do a pretty good job of utilizing the DualSense specifically and all the neat stuff that it can do. But then I can't help but sort of follow up that thought with a little bit of disappointment of, why aren't third parties still 4 years in not committing as much to getting everything they can out of the DualSense as Sony themselves does. But that's not Astro Bot's fault. Still an awesome game, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing that. I think my daughter will love that one too, because she's heavy into platformers these days.
Well, jumping back to Xbox, Ryan, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, another super impressive game this year. Gameplay-wise, maybe not for everyone, but no one can deny what they accomplished with the facial animation in this game. I think they set a new standard for facial animation in a game, which often looks photorealistic. Incredibly detailed faces, from beads of sweat pouring down, dirt clogging their pores, individual eyelashes, bloodshot eyes. It's all there. This is one of the first games to take full advantage of Unreal Engine 5, which means it used the Lumen lighting system, which we saw in the Unreal Engine 5 tech demo from years ago. Super realistic lighting and shadows, volumetric clouds casting realistic shadows on the ground, and volumetric fog that reacts to Senua's body as she walks through it. It's using the nanite system, which the official line from Epic is Unreal Engine 5's virtualized geometry system, which uses a new internal mesh format and rendering technology to render pixel scale detail and high object counts. Translation: there are lots of really nice looking rocks in the game. Even tiny little items on Senua's outfit, like a metal buckle, will cast realistic shadows on her body. So again, the gameplay is maybe a little bit out of a lot of people's wheelhouse, but I think the new standards that they set with visuals in this game are going to be chased by other developers for years to come. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good reason why Microsoft showed this as the first official Series X game ever publicly at the Game Awards in 2019, alongside the reveal of the console itself. And it took a while for that game to get done, and took a while for it to get on our hard drives. But as you said, Daemon, it's gameplay-wise, it's kind of more of a walking simulator. There's not a ton of depth to it, and I played it. I enjoyed it, but it's not one I'm going to go back to. But yeah, technologically, it is. I would say, I don't think this is hyperbole. I think it's the best looking Xbox game ever, to this point. Name any Xbox game from the last 20 years. I don't think visually there's anything or either more impressive or technologically overall more impressive than Hellblade 2. It really, if we're giving our own little next gen game of the year awards, sort of focusing specifically on the next gen aspects of things, then yeah, Hellblade 2 deserves that mention for sure.
Now, Max, there are a couple of games that received benefits from the PlayStation 5 Pro, which I think are worth mentioning. However, before we get there, I think Star Wars Outlaws is a game worth calling out. This is a game with huge open environments with plant life that's all being affected by the weather and the wind and your speeder bike as you ride past. Again, volumetric clouds with realistic shadows casted everywhere. It's using ray tracing, creates great lighting and reflections in interior and exterior environments. And then if you have a 120 hertz TV monitor, the game offers a 40 frames per second quality mode, which provides a nice compromise between resolution and frame rate if you have that ability there. So, Max, how does Star Wars Outlaws, how's that sitting with you today, a few months after its release?
So I've been kind of chipping away at this one. At launch, it definitely, I know it kind of underwhelmed a lot of people. It had kind of a rocky reception. Ubisoft has gone ahead and patched a bunch of stuff. Like they've gone in and made little, not so minor quality of life adjustments, changing the enemy AI, making it so that there are no auto fail stealth missions. Again, this is one of those cases where it is kind of the early adopters who get punished, because like when it first came out, it's a very impressive game, but there's always those sort of growing pains that come with a massive launch like that. And it's really cool to see that the studio has stuck with it and continued making these minor tweaks. So anybody who slept on this game, and see it on sale or whatever, it's totally worth checking out, especially if you are fond of that particular seedy underbelly scum and villainy corner of Star Wars, which I very much am. But yeah, I feel like with these big huge games like this, it can be very easy to almost get overwhelmed by the amount of things you're looking at, and it can be easy to almost just kind of just glaze over and not even process how much detail is in this world. And again, little things like blades of grass moving when you're on your speeder bike, and weather effects and things like that. The thing that jumped out to me in particular, and I realize this isn't necessarily indicative of the gameplay, but popping into photo mode and taking pictures of some of just the random NPC aliens kicking around, and really just seeing how incredibly detailed little things like that, this random Rhodian dude is having a drink at the bar, and just how the light, plays off of those big, big googly eyes. Like, it was just, there's clearly a lot of love and attention went into this game. And that's true of really, I feel like all AAA games, but it's, it really just digging into it, taking a minute to kind of breathe it in. There's some really impressive stuff there. And the elements of gameplay that weren't quite up to snuff are getting, gradually tweaked and fixed, which is very cool.
Before we continue, the Game Awards are just around the corner, and we can't wait to see which games come out on top for the prestigious ceremony. Some of the biggest categories to keep an eye on are Game of the Year, Best Performance, and Best Multiplayer Game. There are tons of great nominees, but my personal picks are Astro Bot as Game of the Year, Brianna White as Aerith for this year's Best Performance, and Helldivers 2 as this year's Best Multiplayer title. But what do you think? What are your picks for these categories? Head to IGN's Twitter to cast your vote and let us know. I'll be checking back during our Game Awards post-show coverage to see if you got them right. Thank you to Xfinity for sponsoring this segment. Get fast, reliable internet and smooth, low-lag connection from Xfinity. And then there are a couple of games that were released this year that were already great at launch, but I think they really benefited from the PlayStation 5 Pro. And those would be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Stellar Blade. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's locked at 60 frames per second on PS5 Pro. It looks much crisper. There's more detail. It improves skin textures and individual hair strands. And then Stellar Blade, it added 2 new graphics modes, the Pro mode and Pro Max mode. So Pro uses PSSR to create a sharper image in the game, and then the Pro Max lifts the 30 frames per second cap on the original game's quality mode. The original, both of the original balanced and performance modes, those are now locked at 60 frames per second, and it can do 120 hertz. So I don't know, the PS5 Pro, it's still kind of early days. I think the only sales numbers we got that is that it outsold the PlayStation 4 Pro in Japan. We haven't heard any numbers for the U.S. We're going to talk about that in just a second with our poll results from last week. But Max, how are you going into the new year? Do you expect to see more and more games benefiting from the PlayStation 5 Pro?
Here's what I hope we see. The Game Awards are happening very soon. They're happening the night that this episode goes up, or something like that. So I really hope we get a bunch of reveals from Sony that just happen to have that little captured on PS5 Pro down in the corner, because I think that's going to move some consoles. I think that's going to really impress people. I haven't even gone hands-on with one of these things in person. Like, I haven't seen one in action. And if I did see one in action, I don't know necessarily that it would blow me away, because from what I've seen, everything has been very, very subtle improvements. But I'd really like to see what happens when this is when games that were specifically made to take full advantage of this, which again, it always takes a minute for developers to properly do that. But that's what, my fingers crossed, that's what I hope we see a lot more of in 2025 is games that really, really take advantage of this horsepower.
All right, those are the games that I wanted to highlight. Max, Ryan, any other games from this year you want to point out that seem particularly next gen to you?
Yet the other two super most recent ones, along with Indiana Jones as it happens, and that's Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Again, whether or not it's your cup of tea, if the idea of simulating aviation doesn't sound appealing to you, that's okay. For those that are, it's another glorious simulation of that. Our own Seth Macy gave this one a 9 out of 10. After 2020, got a 10 out of 10. But you don't have to be interested in simulation games to take a look at it and see how jaw-droppingly gorgeous it is and how beautifully, and in this case, it's actually accurate to say realistic the graphics are. So that one, and then getting back over on the sci-fi side, Stalker 2, another Unreal Engine 5 game, along with Hellblade 2. And Stalker 2, maybe it's not quite as, doesn't quite punch you in the face as hard visually as Hellblade 2, but it's certainly got a lot more going on in the gameplay department, and it is a really good-looking game for the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. So, yeah, if you're looking for something pretty, Microsoft definitely delivered this fall for sure.
And then, Max, earlier this year, the PS5 got its own version of The Last of Us Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Were you impressed with
it's
that
easy
one?
to forget that game wasn't released on PS5 because it came out just about 20 minutes before the PS5 launch. But that was up until recently just a PS4 game that had, took advantage of the PS5's higher power. This is an example of Naughty Dog really going back and taking advantage of what the PS5 could do. I feel like it kind of got swept under the rug because there's always been so much noise and discourse surrounding that game. And again, this one dropped in January, so it feels like a million years ago. But again, that is one game that took great advantage of the PS5. Elsewhere in the survival horror realm, there's also Silent Hill 2 Remake, which, that has the advantage of the kind of before and after we get with remakes. You look at a screenshot of a PS2 game, pretty much anything looks like a major improvement, but it was really cool that Bloober Team was able to really stick the landing on this one and pull off the assignment that they were given. And I know a lot of fans of that beloved classic were, I think they had lowered expectations, and they came away pretty surprised and happy about that one. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Metal Gear Solid Delta does the same.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to find out about that one next year. There you have it. Some picks from us for what are the most next-gen games released in 2024. Let's look at the results from last week's poll. We were asking, did you buy any gaming hardware during this year's Black Friday event? And far and away, the winning answer with 40% of the vote was the PlayStation 5 Pro. That's beating out Xbox Series console, a MetaQuest, Nintendo Switch, or PSVR 2, which, I don't know. Makes me narrow my eyes a little bit. The winning result was the very expensive console that isn't sold out anywhere, and that was not on sale. I don't know. There are no Black Friday sales on the PS5 Pro, so there might be some funny business happening there. In any case. And that's going to do it for this week's edition. We are recording this on the week of the Game Awards, but because of scheduling things, we had to record earlier in this week. So next week's episode, please be excited. There'll definitely be some big news and reveals that we can react to then. So until then, thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thanks to everyone working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with the latest gaming hardware news. We'll see you then.